Nick. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Juraj. Pleasure to be here with you.
It's great for us to have you as well. I'm sure many people in the industry have met you, have heard about you, know you, but there might be some in our audience who haven't heard about you yet. So let's start with your brief introduction and your personal aviation journey. When and how did it start? And if you can briefly walk us through your journey.
Not a problem. Gosh, I'm just thinking to myself, many people in the industry know me. Well, that's a function of being in the industry and for nearly 15 years now, and being predominantly in alliances. Alliance is obviously about relationships. So you do get to meet lots of different people from lots of different places. And that's the bit of the job that I've always enjoyed the most, building those relationships. But I guess I should go back to how it all started. And why I am where I am today. I've always been fascinated by travel, planes and trains. Growing up, my four great loves were planes, trains, cricket and football. So today's a big day. Obviously, we're recording when England plays Scotland, so half of my mind is on that today. But after going to university, I took a completely different path. I went to work for the Japanese government for 3 years, then did my master's in Asian studies and decided I wanted to change the world. I got into politics. I was a researcher.
Very quickly, I'm curious how you get a job with Japanese government as a student
Honestly,
or a graduate.
By accident. I went to a presentation for working in Australia, for taking a year after university to go and work in Australia. I arrived 1 hour early, and they were presenting about something called the JET program in Japan. And it was the year before the World Cup. So it was the year before the World Cup in Japan and South Korea. Mm-hmm. So I'm giving away my age here. Yeah. And I developed a real interest. I applied, and very long story short, I got it. But what that did actually, it links into my airline career. It taught me a lot about travel. Taught me a lot about connections, taught me a lot about frequent flyer programs as I was traveling backwards and forwards from Japan to the UK, down to Australia, basically across the world. So I worked out how to accumulate miles, who to fly with across the different alliance groups to maximize those opportunities and where I could stop over. A real good education. But fast forwarding, I took that into my master's, as I say, in Asian studies, then went to work for an MP as a researcher. But I never lost that interest in aviation, commercial aviation in particular. And back in 2007, British Airways ran their graduate scheme externally for the first time in several years. And I was fortunate enough to get a place on the Leaders for Business program. So I joined British Airways in 2007. And as a grad, I started off working as a customer service duty manager in Terminal 1. Now, in 2008, we had two major incidents. We had the BA-38, which missed the runway, crash landed, and then we had the opening of Terminal 5. And with the BA-38, I had to look after the cabin crew off that. And then the opening of Terminal 5, everyone obviously knows about. So a real deep but great learning experience to understand some of the things that can happen in this industry. After that, I moved to network planning, where I did short haul. And at that time, we fell into the global financial crisis. So the short haul team was actually reduced to 2 people at one stage. Myself, with very limited Excel skills, for example, and the manager. So I was really thrown in at the deep end and had to learn very quickly how network planning works. But it really was quite interesting. I was really proud to launch a route towards the end of my time there, which was Heathrow Gothenburg, or bring it back onto the network. From there, I thought I need things to go a bit slower, to be a bit calmer. I went into marketing in Asia Pacific Africa, but this was the time when British Airways introduced mixed fleet. There were cabin crew strikes, and people in the business were asked to fly. So I ended up flying. I worked as cabin crew and probably did about 30 or 40 sectors.
Wow.
It was fantastic. What that gave us as grads, as relatively new people into the business, was a front to back understanding of how the business works. We couldn't ask for more experience. It really was the best introduction into the world of airlines.
Something you cannot learn in any university.
No, not at all. Not at all. Real hands-on experience. You know, when you're talking to a customer who's just been offloaded off a flight because it's oversold, that's a real challenge. And there were plenty of incidents like that across the different areas of the business, but really a fascinating introduction into the world of airlines. But coming off the graduate scheme, the one area that always interested me was alliances. And I applied for a position in the alliances team and got it. So I started working there, and my responsibilities were looking after the code share relationships with several of the One World carriers, looking after the Sun Air franchise in Denmark and the Comair franchise down in South Africa. And also as the joint business with American Airlines started, looking at how we as British Airways optimize the use of code shares. When AA started, obviously they've got a huge domestic network, lots of flights. So that was my real baptism into how code share works, how interline works, and how essentially code share is a finite tool. You're limited by flight numbers, traffic regulations, etc., etc. So a really good experience. And there, of course, I got to meet lots of different people from lots of different airlines and really start to develop my understanding of how the world of airline partnerships works. But around about this time, I met my wife, or my wife-to-be, and she was living in Bishop Stortford near Cambridge. I was in Reading, and we decided we needed to move in together. We chose Doha in Qatar. So, no, I applied to go and work for Qatar Airways in their network and partnership strategy team. Got the position, and we moved over there. So there, my responsibility was, as I say, network and partnership strategy. Qatar is a fast-growing network airline. Obviously, had a lot of thinking to do in terms of where to fly, who to partner with. So I got heavily involved with that. And this was the time when Qatar joined One World. And what was particularly interesting at that juncture was that obviously one of the key reasons for joining an alliance grouping is to leverage the potential for relationships with member carriers. So within One World, of course, you had American Airlines, you had British Airways, and you had Qantas. Well, at this time, Qantas had just done a joint venture with Emirates. So Qatar wasn't necessarily able to get all the benefits it would have wanted or needed from working with Qantas down in Australia. And that caused me to spend a bit of time thinking about, well, how do relationships really work? You know, why have Qantas gone outside of the alliance structure to partner with somebody who can meet their requirements? So lots of thinking there. I was in Qatar for 18 months, and I noticed an opportunity come up at Virgin Australia. And as I mentioned, in terms of the Japan experience, going down to Australia had always been a dream of mine. So the opportunity to apply for a position was one thing. To actually go down there and then get it was another. It was I was made up. So down at Virgin Australia, I looked after the partner relations in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. The main one of which was with Etihad, who were a shareholder, an equity shareholder in Virgin Australia. So that was a fabulous experience, just understanding how a deeper relationship with someone like Etihad works. And Virgin was really interesting because they had similar relationships with Singapore Airlines, Air New Zealand, and Delta. But Singapore was particularly interesting because essentially you were talking about the same or similar markets, especially when it came to Europe. So how do we work with those two to develop the best possible customer proposition ultimately, for our customers, for their customers when traveling between those two markets. But as well as Etihad, we also had the likes of South African Airways as a codeshare partner, Air Berlin, Air Mauritius. So a real breadth of different partners across the world. Now, the interesting thing with Etihad, of course, was that they were developing the Etihad Airways Partners Program at the same time. We're taking a different view in terms of traditional alliances and how you build that network of carriers. And I have to say, they were a lot of fun to work with. They were really good to work with in terms of their thinking around the practicalities of alliance relationships. How do both carriers benefit commercially? How do we develop seamless connectivity, the best possible customer experience? It was such a good education for me, and I got to work with some really cool people. But at this time, this was when NDC as a concept was developing at IATA. So new distribution capability. How can we take our content, make it richer, and get it to the customer? How can we get better content to the customers? And I remember spending time down at VA with our distribution team, with our RM team, talking about this, fabulous conversations, where basically we asked, why can't we do this for alliances? Why can't we take that rich content and combine it with another carrier's rich content? Traditionally, interline and codeshare relationships have been somewhat limited in terms of how much or how you work with each other from a fare point of view, from a product point of view, and then from an ancillaries point of view as well. It's very difficult to offer ancillary products in an interline or codeshare environment. And Virgin Australia, as in its DNA, a lower cost carrier, had quite a strong ancillary component. Just before I arrived there, they'd actually migrated from Navitaire to Sabre. So they were going through that journey of being a low-cost carrier, ticketless carrier, to a more full-service carrier or a hybrid carrier, so to speak. So a real good experience for me in terms of learning how the different PSSs work, how we create different types of partnerships, so on and so forth. But after 3 years there, my wife was keen to return to Europe, and I was very fortunate to be approached by Vueling to ask if I wanted to interview to head up their alliances department. So I did, and I was fortunate to get the job.
Again, slightly unusual for a, let's say, low-cost carrier or a hybrid, which Vueling was, to have even such a department for partnerships, which you don't really see very often in this type of carriers.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. I mean, it's linked to whatever an airline strategy is in terms of distribution and partnerships. But what had happened, I think it was a year or two previously, is that IAG had bought Vueling. So Vueling, again, like Virgin Australia, a true low-cost carrier, true low-cost point-to-point carrier in terms of its DNA, had attracted interest. Obviously, IAG with Iberia in Spain and then British Airways in the UK wanted to grow its portfolio. So the purchase was done. And one of the first things that happened after Vueling joined the group was that it became, or the necessity to develop interline and codeshare relationships was there. The group wanted to leverage Iberia's point of sale strength in Spain, British Airways' point of sale strength in the UK to sell Vueling services. So interline and codeshare relationships were developed. So Vueling went from being a true low-cost carrier without e-ticket server capability to having to develop this to enable both British Airways and Iberia to sell Vueling services. Now, initially that was focused on distributing point-to-point, but that grew into offering connections. So using the fantastic network that Vueling had in Barcelona, but also in markets such as Rome, Amsterdam, Paris, and enabling connectivity onto those services. Now, those connections, developing those connections presented challenges. So as a Navitaire hosted carrier working with legacy carriers using code share as a mechanic, we ran into problems with things like schedule changes. We ran into problems with IROPS, misconnections, and our ability to manage those as a ticketless carrier was limited. So when I arrived, one of the first things I had to do was to start managing how we service Iberia's bookings, how we service British Airways code share bookings. And this was a lot of work. This was a lot of work for a business that hadn't really focused on these things. Our entire setup was based around offering those low-cost point-to-point services. But all of a sudden, I have to go to the IT team, the customer team, say, hey, guys, listen, we need to make developments to manage these requirements. And it was really important for us. Iberia in particular contributed a significant portion of revenue on those Vueling services. So what that did was it gave me two things: an understanding of the power of working with certain airlines in terms of distributing your services, but also the complexity that exists with legacy systems, legacy tools. And specifically here, I'm referring to interline and code share. Now, thinking back to the experience at Virgin Australia, NDC, as I mentioned, it was about 2-3 years ago, I really started to think there's a better way of doing this. And Vueling, as that low-cost carrier with strong API content, with a real strong ancillary component, wasn't able to maximize that in terms of partnerships. It was difficult for another carrier to sell our products, and we couldn't sell another carrier's ancillary products. At the same time, of course, we had demands from partners to sell them, whether it was Iberia, whether it was British Airways, or whether it was the other code share relationships we had. And it was just too much for us to do. It was too much of a diversion from our business model, who we are, what we do. So this was the time I started to think, right, yeah, there's another way of doing this. There's got to be another way of doing this. And I'd been familiar with DOHOP for a couple of years. The first time I actually came across them was as I left Virgin Australia. I went to the group executive before I left, and I said, John Thomas, I'm moving to Vueling. I'm going into the alliance. I'm going to head up alliances. Do you have any advice? And he was always great for things like this. He said, yeah. He said, have a look at a couple of programs, Via Milano and Gatwick Connect. I thought, okay. And as I'm sure you're aware, these were two programs that were developed because both airports saw a significant number of self-connections taking place.
Yep.
Customers were using the networks at both these airports to create their own connections. They recognized this, and they engaged with DOHOP to offer a connection product. So a flight with one airline connecting to another airline with an insurance product in the middle. Now, my next experience with this was actually when I was flying through Gatwick one time, and I went into arrivals, I walked up the escalators, I saw a big Gatwick Connects board, and in the middle of it, I saw Vueling. Vueling is a participant carrier. So, okay, right. So I got in touch with my boss, Manuel Ambriz, who was Chief Network Officer, and said, Manuel, is this, am I responsible for this? Because it's not on my list. I haven't seen it anywhere. And eventually we found out that no, it's with distribution. So distribution owned this. So because we'd been providing our content to aggregators, Travel Fusion in this instance, DOHOP were able to pick this up and enable these connections.
Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting. That is cool. So as I was grappling with the challenges of Vueling around traditional interline, traditional code share, the need for us to sell other carriers, we started to engage different businesses who offer similar products. DOHOP, there's others, there's Air Black Box, Kiwi, etc. But it became very clear to me very quickly that DOHOP was the one for us. And I'll touch more on virtual interline in a moment, but we decided to go ahead with engaging DOHOP to launch a platform, and this was pre-COVID. So I think it was November 2019 we first met the team, and it was a few months after that we decided to proceed. When COVID struck, this only accelerated the requirements. The first thing we saw was, of course, airlines dramatically reduce their capacity, whether it was into Barcelona or onto other points across our network. And as we saw this happening and thought about, and initially we thought this would be a short-term thing. We thought, well, in terms of recovery, we're going to need to maximize our opportunities to fill seats. We're going to need partnerships. Now, the ability to stand up a traditional interline or code share relationship is limited. It takes time and it's expensive. So we became very clear in our head that this was the vehicle that we needed to go with. The other thing, and I mentioned this previously, was in terms of catering for the return of demand. And excuse me, sorry, that's the Apple Watch trying to answer a question. If it can answer how demand is going to return, then I'm sure everyone is going to pay close attention. No, we were thinking about this, and of course, one of your biggest tools is flexibility. Flexibility in terms of your capacity, your fleet, but also in terms of your product. And Vueling, with its dynamic product, its ancillary component, needed to work with its API to position that as best as possible to cater to demand as it returned. Is it going to be domestic Spanish? Is it going to be intra-regional European? Is it going to be the UK market? We need to be able to move quickly. And that was a key consideration. Now, dynamic content doesn't work for CodeShare, just doesn't work. So in terms of focusing on the API, pushing our content out through that, it became very clear as well that DOHOP represented a real opportunity for us to enable that, connecting that dynamic content with another carrier. But also within IAG, for example, in terms of how we distribute each other's point-to-point services, as the content is changing, there's a big consideration there as well. Is interline or code the right mechanic to be able to distribute somebody else's content? Can you offer as much as you would like to? Can you offer as much rich content as you would like to? So that's where I became clear that the DOHOP product, but also the concept, is the way forward in terms of partnerships. Now, at the same time, I'd also joined the IATA Interline Working Group and latterly the Intermodal Working Group. And IATA, through one order, the offer order concept is thinking about this. How can we take advantage of new technology, new capabilities in the market to enable better connections? The industry has struggled to connect full service carriers, ticketed carriers, with low-cost carriers, ticketless carriers. And there's a clear recognition, given the state of the industry at the moment, that needs to change. That has to change. We need to be able to work with each other. So that's when I decided that yes, I need to think about my future, and I want to get more involved in this. So that was the experience that essentially led me to DOHOP.
Listening to you talking about your journey, it seems to me like it was a destiny, like it was just inevitable that you have to end up in DOHOP.
Listen, I think so. I think so. Partnerships, as I'm sure my background has sort of touched on, has always been there for me. I've always enjoyed it. I've always loved it. I've always been interested in it. I've always been a bit geeky about it. But looking at what DOHOP offered, yeah, I just thought they've got it. They know what they're doing. And that's when conversations started, and 2 months ago, I joined to head up partnerships and industry affairs, and I'm super pleased to be here. I say here, I'm at home at the moment, but super pleased to be with DOHOP and the team there.
But as your picture says on LinkedIn, you have already been to Iceland since you joined.
I have, and look, when I joined, it was really important for me to get out and meet everybody, to understand more about the organization
Absolutely.
and the
Yeah.
people who've built what I consider to be a really strong product. And I was super fortunate to be able to go shortly after the volcano had erupted. So you could say I had a rather explosive start to my my DOHOP career. But the main point there, as I say, was to get out and meet everybody. And it really is a great team of forward thinkers who've developed a great product. And I'm just pleased to be able to make a contribution, to use the experience that I've gained and the enthusiasm that I have to help drive this forward, because I really am quite, as you can probably imagine, passionate about the future of partnerships and how we can help shape that.
You've been with DOHOP just for 2 months, but I'm sure you have been watching the industry very closely also before that. And but the pandemic has accelerated many things, also in our world, in aviation, in the airline world. So have you noticed also an uptake from the airline world in this virtual interlining industry, if we can call it like this? Are they seeking? Do they understand that how many opportunities can they benefit from if they join join the move for virtual interlining?
The simple answer is yes. So we've had not just interest from several different types of carriers, from those full service ticketed carriers to the lower cost carriers. We've launched platforms at the same time. So we launched Air France in January. Vueling should go live today. The talk started a year ago, but hopefully today.
We're recording this
that will
on
be
18th
announced.
of June, so
yes.
for those of them who will be listening later.
So keep your eyes peeled. But what that demonstrates is that there is interest from across the industry. Now, they're just platforms that have launched. So let me clarify. DOHOP offers essentially two different things. You can join as a participating airline. So what we do here is we work with you and your API or your web service content and plug it into our platform, so that our platform hosts can distribute your content.
Is it right to say that this is the most usual kind of cooperation you have?
Well, we have more carriers as participating airlines than platform hosts. Now, the second part is to be a platform host. That's where you consume this content and distribute it. So the most famous example, the most well-known example that we have is Worldwide by EasyJet. So it was the first product that DOHOP launched, and what Worldwide by EasyJet enables is a customer going on to easyjet.com or searching for flights through different meta search engines, the ability to book a flight that, for example, starts on EasyJet, goes from Inverness to Gatwick, then connects to Emirates, going from Gatwick to Dubai, for example, absent a traditional interline or code-share relationship. So we've got, I think we're up to 15 platforms at the moment, and this is growing. We are experiencing a lot of interest at the moment, because every airline at the moment is in a position where it's having to think about its future. What is demand going to look like? Where are we going to have to fly? What is our strategy? What is our network strategy? What is our retail strategy? What is our revenue management strategy? What is our distribution strategy? All these questions are up there, and partnerships is a critical component of this. As those networks contract, and generally they contract to hubs, you focus on your core O&Ds, you're going to have to work with people at the other end of the route to offer connections. Now, the carriers who you might traditionally offer those connections with are changing. Take Gatwick, for example. British Airways have taken short haul out of Gatwick. So if you're flying into Gatwick and need to offer a connection, your best bet's EasyJet. British Airways are a ticketed carrier. EasyJet are a ticketless carrier. So in terms of how you work with them, things are changing. And this is replicated all over the world. So what we've noticed is that as capacity has returned and is returning, it's generally coming from the lower cost carriers, the ticketless carriers.
Right.
They're almost the first movers, short haul, leisure oriented. And basically what that points at is a need for different types of airlines to have to work together. And that's where we can assist. That's our business. That's what we do. We create connections between not only different airline types, but also different travel service provider types. So yeah, we've had a lot of interest, and it's a really exciting time to work with a range of different airlines across the world to help develop the product. Now I must be clear. Sorry, Yuri, I must be clear here.
Of course.
DOHOP is a B2B travel tech company. Our modus operandi is to work with our airline partners directly to identify and deliver win-win opportunities. We only create connections. We only offer destinations. We only offer content that you want to offer. That's the essence of our business. We create those connections for you. We enable you to sell things that you would not be able to sell or offer otherwise. And that includes the ancillary component that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Very, very exciting times, as you are saying. We need to move to another topic, and I'm cautious
Sure.
about your time. But one more question about virtual interlining for those airline managers who are listening to us. Would you say that it makes more sense, or more those who can benefit more are usually the smaller carriers? Small, let's say smaller regional. We are on AviaDev Europe podcast, so smaller European airlines can benefit more than, let's say, Wizz Air or Ryanair or EasyJet, which is already in your portfolio?
I think the beauty of this is that there's benefit for everybody. There's benefit for everybody. It really links to what your strategy as an airline is. How do you want to fill your seats? How do you want to offer your product to your customer? What's your digital strategy? So the most important thing for DOHOP is that you have your content available in API or web service format. Now, for regional carriers, I guess traditionally the distribution strategy is different to a bigger carrier. Your market is different. And perhaps that's where we're looking at something like becoming a participating airline, having those platform hosts distribute your content might be of interest. But the point I must really make is it depends on you. What do you want to do? What's your ambitions? Do you want to develop broader distribution capability? It's up to the airlines. We're there as a B2B company to work with you to deliver against your partnership strategy, your digital strategy, your distribution strategy. How can we help you sell more content or have more content sold?
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Now to the second topic I would like to talk to you today, and I know you are very passionate about it, which is intermodality. And it's maybe another buzzword, but definitely also something that can totally change the game of the travel industry in general. We're not just talking about aviation here. So where do you think are the major opportunities for aviation to join this intermodality movement?
Yeah, intermodality for me, and you're right, I'm very passionate about this, is more than a buzzword. It's something that we really must be more focused on. Now, as I mentioned before, my childhood, I love planes and trains. The idea of taking a train to an airport and then catching a plane, woof. And I've now got children who experience the same thing. So it's there in our house. My personal experience was that I was a commuter between Barcelona and Newbury. So I used to, for example, fly out of Barcelona every Friday night into Heathrow. Then I'd have to take a bus from Heathrow to Reading, and then I'd have to take a train from Reading to Newbury. Now, I'd have to buy 3 separate tickets with 3 separate boarding passes. And the risk of failure or risk of misconnection was always there, and happened many, many times. So by the time I got home on a Friday night, I didn't even want to talk about planes and trains to the children. And it became clear to me, look, this has to change. This has to change. And there's several ways in which it needs to change, some of which we can work on, some of which have a much, much, much longer lead time. So the first is the infrastructure. Whilst there are train stations at Heathrow, there is no railway that goes direct to Newbury or even Reading. So you can only offer what is available. And if the infrastructure isn't there, you can't offer it. But the second part is systems integration. For me, it just seemed a bit mad that you can't integrate that content. Why can't you offer a connection from Barcelona through to Newbury? Now, this has been offered. There are companies out there who've done this previously. Access Rail enabled through traditional interline relationships connectivity for ticketing carriers. But again, going back to IATA and the one order, the offer order piece, they've clearly identified in terms of intermodal that there is work to be done to create those connections. Now, at Vueling, a key piece for me was enabling those connections in different markets. So, for example, we had a limited footprint in Germany. We had a challenge in France where we really needed to work with the train company for disruption reasons. It would have been great to be able to reaccommodate or reprotect people onto train services out of Paris, for example. Now, this was in my mind pre-COVID. As COVID came about, the dynamics have changed rapidly. Yeah. We've seen in the last few months that the French governments have announced there will be no domestic flying under 2.5 hours.
Except those connecting to Charles de Gaulle for Air France.
Yes, there have been some exemptions, but I think it's fair to say that the direction of travel is clear.
Yeah.
There is a move away from certain types of flying towards different modes of transport. And we've heard similar in Germany. Yeah. We're hearing similar in Spain, and of course in Scandinavia, it's a very hot topic. Now, I agree with it. I agree with it. I think there's certain types of flying that we have to think about. Where there's an alternative high-speed rail option, then from a sustainability point of view, from an environmental point of view, we should be looking at this. But if airlines are not able to offer these connections, if the infrastructure isn't there, then there's major change that needs to be made. But the systems piece can be done. And a key reason for me to join DOHOP was that DOHOP are leading in terms of enabling these connections. I'm passionate about this. Now, airlines have got that API web service capability. Well, train companies have this too. They've got it too. So the ability to enable this connectivity is there. What's missing, and this is what IATA are focused on, are the standards, is the framework for how these connections are managed. Now, at DOHOP, what we're doing is we're building these connections, but we're also involved in the conversations around how the standards will be developed. And that's really exciting because it doesn't just stop at trains. There's also the possibility to offer different types of connections with buses, for example, ferries. If you've got your content in certain form, we can work with that. You're right. What this is all about is leveraging technology. It's leveraging the technology in the form that it exists today and creating connections, acting as a translator, if you like, to put the two different types of travel together. And that's a major focus of DOHOPs, a major focus of DOHOPs. And of course, you mentioned before, are airlines showing interest? It's not just airlines that we're hearing from in terms of developing these connections. Airports realize that they have a role to play as well.
Of course.
If they've got train stations at their airport, well, it's in their interest to be able to offer those connections, to be able to improve the customer experience when connecting through their airport. So in this regard, it's a really exciting time. It's obviously the pandemic has been terrible. It really has been bad for the industry. But my strong belief is we have to use this or think about this as an opportunity to make lasting changes that will benefit the industry as a whole, not just the industry, but the broader travel community. And that's really exciting.
And I think that's the really lovely thought for finishing today's podcast. Lots of questions and ideas already bubbling in my mind. So I'm sure we'll bring you back very soon to discuss much deeper many topics that we touched on today. But for those of you who are also very passionate about intermodality, join us on the 29th of June for our online event, AviaDev Europe Summer Briefing. Nick will be joining us as well, and he will be talking more about intermodality and how DOHOP views opportunities related to intermodality. So you can register for free at aviationdevelop.com/Europe. And before we say goodbye, Nick, my usual last question, what do you love the most about aviation?
People, the people you get to meet, the experiences you get to have with different people across the world. It's just fabulous. I've made friends across the world. It's amazing. Some of them support different football teams. That can be a problem. but no, it really is fabulous.
I'm asking this question on every single interview I'm doing it, and I don't think that anybody has ever responded so quickly. Like you did now. So really awesome, and I'm totally with you on that. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Nick, and all the best, and see you soon.
You're right, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.